Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to season 4 of the On Soccer podcast. Very excited for today's guest. I might even say he's like the guy that got me interested in U.S. soccer and the soccer media side of things way back in the day during KickTV. One of the funniest people I've seen in U.S. soccer, and alongside that, an amazing career as well with maybe the greatest goal of all time versus Mexico. I don't know. He says so, but we'll see. But anyway, please welcome to the show, the one and only Jimmy Conrad. How are you doing today, Jimmy?
Oh, baby, what an introduction. You know, I'm looking for a publicist, Projeet. So if you're interested in that role, you're definitely near the top of my candidates. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Excited to be on season 4, and long may this podcast continue.
Absolutely. No, definitely means a lot coming for you. I was just telling you before, but it's a really very surreal moment. Like my friends from back home are all freaking out about this. So definitely excited for everyone to hear this. But anyway, I would love to just get straight into it. So, on every episode, we try to sort of like get an idea of each of our guests' origin story, their intro into soccer, how this love for the game even happened. I've watched your Draw My Life. I've watched like every essentially video that you've ever posted on YouTube. Maybe it's exaggerating, but I've been there.
Keep going. I love the support. It's amazing. Keep going.
Just in terms of your soccer origin story, I'm wondering when you were young, were there like players, teams, like what got you even into the game? Like how did this cool story even start in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I would say that it started with my grandfather, who was Danish, and so he loved the game. And he passed away when I was 11, so he didn't really get to see the fruits of his labor in some capacity because he really planted the seed with me. But I could sense from him very early on, and I think I can speak for most kids, that when you have a peer, not necessarily a peer, a role model or somebody you look up to, or a parent, grandparent, and they're passionate about something, and you can't understand at that point, you're too young to really verbalize like what's happening, but you can pick up on the feeling that they have when they're talking about the sport. Like their voice changes, their energy changes. And I was drawn to that. And he loved the game so much that I was pretty much in. And when I had the opportunity to commit to it full time, at age 11, around the same time that he passed, I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do, because I had a coach like, hey, you're at this age now where you got to focus on one sport or the other. And I was like, baseball sucks. So I'm definitely going to do soccer. But it really started with my grandfather. At the time, it was very limited visibility for the game. Social media, 3 million cable stations, the game being played on so many different platforms and outlets that just didn't exist. So I had to get my information from a club coach that I ended up having he was the one that made us commit. He would keep us informed. So I got to run. So I started to have, when you look at the dots that connect for me in particular, I had a grandfather who loved the game, and that was the first dot that really planted the seed. And then I started to have some good youth coaches who just love the game as well. So there's like this one theme that kind of connects to all the people that I looked up to when I was younger, and really absorbing the sport and understanding the nuance and why it means so much and why it's different than all the other sports, especially here in the States. And that was so important to building that foundation that I needed to continue to grow as a player, and wanting to learn more. And always, I guess in some ways, wanting to become a student of the game, because I think if you stop being a student of the game, you can't take those steps to becoming a professional. I mean, there are guys that get there because they're just so talented. Their talent is undeniable that they're going to get there. But at some point, they're going to hit a wall because people are going to figure them out. So if what you usually do to have success doesn't work, what's your plan B? What's your plan C? What's your plan D? And because I didn't have that traditional talent, I was the intangibles, Projeet. I was more like commitment and working hard and outrunning people. Not necessarily speed, but just like endurance and dealing with adversity probably a little bit better than others. That's why I lasted a long time. But I also was a student of the game. I was always trying to get better. And they call it a growth mindset now, but I had that early on and didn't know it at the time. But definitely looking back, I was always trying to absorb and get better.
No, absolutely. And you bring up this thing about how soccer is different from any other sport because of just like the love of the game globally. And like that really resonates with me, because that's sort of how I fell in love with the game, through my dad. And I remember watching your interviews where you talk about going to like away games in CONCACAF, and like a lot of players get pissed off at people throwing piss bottles and stuff like that. But like you talk a lot about how that's in some way kind of beautiful, because like people care so much about this game that they're willing to go to that length to have their team win. So it's it can be ugly, but it's a beautiful side of the game. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that.
I loved it. I loved going down to areas where you knew that you were going to get some issues. I guess I'm trying to say
Right.
that as diplomatically as possible. But yeah, throwing stuff at
Absolutely.
you, throwing beers at you, throwing bags of piss at you, throwing batteries at you, calling your room at 3 a.m. during a World Cup
Yeah.
qualifier in Trinidad to wake you up, playing music
Insane.
outside of your hotel. They thought they were putting us off, and maybe they were, as you mentioned, with some of the players. But for me, I couldn't get enough. I just
I love that.
loved that there was that type of energy to try to throw you off your game, that it mattered that much to people, that they would get
Mhm.
up and waste their whole night to try to throw you off, to give their team just that little bit more of an opportunity or a little bit more of a chance to maybe get the result that they needed to qualify for a World Cup or to beat the Americans or whatever it was. And I wasn't exposed to that growing up in Southern California at the youth soccer level. And so when you get
Mhm.
into those environments where it's a little bit more tense and there's a little bit more at stake, I couldn't get enough of it. I loved that. And I liked to try to match that focus that I needed to have success in that environment. Because if you make a mistake, and I did plenty of times, if you make a mistake in those environments, they're on top of you. And when
Right.
I remember I was playing, we played a friendly. We went down to Mexico City for preseason in San Jose. And I believe we played Necaxa or Atlas, and we played in their
Mhm.
stadium, like a closed door scrimmage, right? So we're in there, and I am just nervous. This is my rookie year. I'm 22. I'm playing against those teams, and they're still very good. The Mexican League team's very good,
Mhm.
and so they just understood the game a little bit better. I always felt, even when we played them in the Champions League back when I was playing, just their understanding of tactics and how to solve problems quickly. I always admired that. But in this particular game, I was a little unsure of myself with the ball, and
Mhm.
not as being adept in Spanish at the time. I had one of my teammates who can speak Spanish fluently say, "Hey, they're talking to each other to let you have the ball, because when you have it, you're not doing anything with it." And I'm like, wait.
Wow.
Are you coaching me? Or are you telling me what they're saying? Wait, is there like, what's happening here? So at that point, I took offense to that, right? That's an insult. Like, they're letting me have the ball because they think I suck.
It's like in basketball where they're like, "Yo, let him shoot." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like.
exactly. It's exactly right. So I'm glad he gave me that information, because I went on to have a much better second half, and I started to make my decisions quicker. But I needed that information, and I needed to be in that environment where you're outside of your bubble. Nobody cares about your feelings. I think that's
Mhm.
another thing too. When you're in the heat of the moment, like, hey, you can be upset about stuff later. Right now, I need you to make good soccer decisions,
Right.
and with or without the ball. And so there's these little formative moments that happen in your career. And one of those was I going to sink or swim? Was I going to
Mhm.
feel sorry for myself and be really insecure and unsure? Or am I just going to, like, hey, whatever happens, happens, but I got to get better now. I got to start to punish them. If they're going to give me the time on the ball, how can I help my team take advantage of that situation? And I did in the second half. So I was really proud of myself for how I performed in the second half. Not so good in the first half. But there was never an issue with me defensively. It was always
Mm.
more like on the ball. Can you make your
Right.
decisions a little bit quicker? And there's all these nuances and subtleties to the game that I think we bypass a lot when we're analyzing, or if we're goofing around on KickTV or any of that type
Yeah.
of stuff. But when I think about youth development in particular, I still think, and it showed a little bit in our World Cup, where we lacked a little bit of that acumen that I think needed to solve problems in real time.
Absolutely. And you talk about this theme of sort of just like, overcoming just like the doubters, and even overcoming like, yourself and your past, just like, even when no one believes in you. Like, your career path is like very interesting to me because, as I'm sure many people have heard through your other interviews and stuff like that, at first, like, I remember you wanted to go to UCLA so bad. It was like, soccer university basically back in the day, right? And then you ended up being able to transfer after some years at San Diego State. I remember the draft. It was like a comeback story as well, where it didn't work out at first, but then you worked hard and you made it happen. I guess it's like, my question here is that I know that there was so many setbacks that you like, actually, like, one anecdote I really liked was, I remember you talking about how, I think when you were playing youth soccer, Marcelo Balboa was talking something about your weak foot or something like that, about how it wasn't there. And all these factors for the normal player, like, that's like, it just would be over after that. The dream would be over so fast. So I'm wondering, when you got that first MLS contract after those years of grinding, was that like, to this day, would you say that's like the biggest relief of your career? Like, what was that moment like?
Relief? It's funny. In some ways, it's just the beginning. And I think that's a hard thing to accept, because to your point, you've worked so hard to attain this. I got my contract. I signed. I got into MLS. I'm good enough. But then you realize, holy crap, this is the first step this now new journey, and there's a lot of work to do. And if I just want to settle with that and say, hey, I got a contract in MLS, well, I've done that. But if I want to actually be someone of consequence in the league, then I've got a lot of work to do. And I think when you look back on my career, and you've alluded to it, a lot of baby steps. And I think for me in particular, for whatever reason, the universe just did not want me to skip steps. Like I had to do every single step along the way because I'm the little engine that could. I walked on in college.
Right.
I didn't get drafted in MLS after winning the national championship in college, which I thought as a senior I'm going to be drafted for sure. I didn't. Went down to the lower leagues, played in San Diego with the Flash in the A League, which is now comparable to like USL Championship,
Right.
and played with them. Even though we made $800 a month, which is nothing. I slept on floors. I'm training with the team in the morning, training by myself in the afternoon, and I was determined to get to MLS and to prove that I was capable. And I did it after 1 year and got up to San Jose and got signed by them. But even then, you're like, okay, that now what? Like, you kind of get into that now what? And all the things that you've accomplished and all the hard work, yeah, it's validated and the sacrifice is worth it. But it just proves to you that what if I just do a little bit more? What if I continue to take advantage of this opportunity with that same type of mindset? How far can I go? And so I kind of just kept my goals somewhat realistic, and I was having a tough time. People are going to be like, I'm going to be insane when you think about what I'm just about to say, but it got to a point where, and this goes back to this Necaxa game that I was talking about, I just couldn't make my decisions fast enough on the ball. And it wasn't that, it's like I wasn't confident in my plan A. And I just couldn't get it off my feet to plan A quick enough, or I wasn't satisfied with, if plan A wasn't on, how do I find my plan B quickly? And I wasn't confident enough in myself or my ability to find that plan B, or to hit the big switch, or to hit the long ball, or whatever it was. And I just was really young and naive, and tactically naive as well. So what I did was, about halfway through my rookie year, I started watching games, like seriously watching games. I started watching Champions League, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to identify who many consider to be the best defenders in the world. So I looked at Marcel Desailly. I looked at Paolo Maldini in particular, Alessandro Nesta. So a lot of the Milan teams,
the Italians,
yeah. So I watched these guys, and what's interesting about Nesta is I ended up playing against them in a World Cup. So talk about a full circle moment. But I watched them play, and I stopped watching the ball. Now it's hard on TV because the cameras follow the ball, but I would watch where they would position themselves on the fields, and then I would look at what their decisions were. And they just get, honestly, when you strip it all away, and it's really important for kids that want to get better at the game, they got to go and watch games, especially live.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what level. You can be like, oh, this or USL League 2, or it does. Dude, just go to games for players that you know are a little bit better than you, whatever it is. And just watch the player that plays your position. Watch the decision making. In some ways, you'd be like, I wouldn't do that in that moment. I would have done this, right? You still learn from that. So anyway, I'm watching Nesta, I'm watching Maldini, Desailly, and they're not doing anything that I'm actually not capable of, right? They're just getting it off their feet. They're playing quickly. They have a little bit more composure under pressure, and that takes time to develop as well. But in terms of decision-making, it's not like they were hitting these, 50-yard balls on a dime to somebody that's getting a breakaway.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just playing quickly, and they're playing simple, and less is more, right? And that was really something I had to adopt. So I took all those notes, and I honestly had this big chart, and I'd say, okay, how many times I do one touch, how many times I do two touch, how many times I do three touch. And you could see that they were in the 1 or 2 touch area as a center back, which was my position, the whole game. And then I'd also mark when they were just clearing it, right? And why they cleared. If I had time to write a little note, I would on why they cleared it and when it made sense to do that. So you start to see this, and then you start to visualize you doing these same things. It's incredibly important to go through that process. But I was writing it down like a maniac, okay? I was a math major, so I liked writing a lot of things down. So you take that, and I started to apply it to my own game. So I would have a chart of what I would do at practice, and I'd come home and fill it out. How many times did I play one touch? How many times did I play two touch? How many times did I lose the ball? I mean, I'm not just talking like when we're playing 11v11 in training or like a 7v7 game or some type of thing. I'm talking even when we're playing 5v2 and rondos when we're just dicking around, warming up. Like, I wanted to be good in every moment. It wasn't just this, I can turn it on and hit a switch whenever I want. So I got into the weeds a little bit, and I did that for the rest of the year. And I don't know if I still have my notebooks, but they are crazy chock full.
That's insane.
Yeah, but I had to get to that point. I had to strip my game down and learn how to get out of my own way and not try to do more than I was capable of. And that was an important lesson throughout that. And then I would write goals for myself and have this goal setting, some far out of reach and some not. And at some point I evolved from that. It wasn't something that I kept up, but I started to think the game through that lens because I had gone through that process and I didn't need to write it down anymore. I could hold myself accountable kind of in real time and knew what I needed to do. Like, okay, that's not on. Next time I got to go this way or vice versa. And so that I think it was another building block of laying the foundation of, again, being a student of the game and wanting to get better and figuring out ways to make that happen. And what's interesting, just to fill this in or put a bow on this, when you start to think like this, and this is really important, no matter you play sports or anything else, when you receive feedback from a coach, you receive that in a much more positive way because they're giving you incredible insight and information on how your game is being perceived by your teammates, by the coaching staff, by probably the fans. Hey, you're not good at your left foot. Well, shit, if my coach doesn't think I'm good with my left foot, I got to pick my game up. So I would go into the racquetball court of this one club that we were at, health club, and then just work on my left foot nonstop with a tennis ball, with a racquetball ball, and anything I could to continue to fine tune because I didn't want that to be a weakness anymore. And I didn't want anybody having a way to poke holes in my game. And eventually it got me to where I wanted to go.
That's, first of all, I think that how you break down the game into sort of like a science, like writing down, one touch, two touches, which situations. I think those type of little things is obviously what makes a difference. And that's very cool to hear because I personally, we've interviewed players on here that have had like, different processes and stuff like that. This is definitely a very unique one that I think, a lot of people can learn from. And
I'm giving you my secrets, Projeet. I'm giving you my secrets. I'm
going to apply for the draft now.
Here on soccer. Yeah.
I love it. But hey, at the end of the day, like, these strategies you use, whether it's writing it down, going to the racquetball, practicing, the fruits of your labor are very evident in your career achievements. And, I do want to talk about your time in MLS, USMNT, and we'll go into the nitty gritty. But I guess just to start off, throughout your career, there are sort of like three aspects of it that I think are very interesting. And I'm wondering if we can just start off by ranking these individual achievements within your career and how you like them.
Sure.
So the three I have are 1, MLS Cup, obviously, winning that, going through that process. 2, Defender of the Year within MLS, an individual achievement, maybe a little bit different feeling. And 3, representing your country on the world's biggest stage in the World Cup, like that full circle moment you mentioned against Italy. How do those sort of like like when you look back at your career, how do those three sort of stack up for you?
Yeah, good question. I would say 1 would be the World Cup. Nice. By a clear margin. I think that winning an MLS Cup and becoming the MLS Defender of the Year were all important markers to getting me to that moment, if that makes any sense, right? So you learned how to be a winner. You learned, and that 2001 year, I shouldn't have said the year. That makes me feel super old. But when we won MLS Cup, it was a difficult year for me because I had broken my foot to start that year.
Right.
And we had a very good team. And we went on like some 17 game unbeaten streak. And I missed the first 8 or 9 games of that because of my broken foot. But when I came back, I couldn't get back into the team because the team was playing so well. So, and it was hard because I thought that I was slated to be the starter before I got hurt. And then I got hurt. And then we signed Troy Dyack and he played really well. And they just had a nice chemistry. The team did. And I couldn't break in. I didn't know how to break in. But by the end of the season, I was the starting right back, and we ended up winning the MLS Cup. And it was a great achievement. Actually, I was 23 at the time. I thought I was going to win another 8 MLS Cups because, like, I got one at 23. Course, yeah. I mean, how many more am I going to get here? And that was my only one, sadly. But it was kind of a sign of working through a season. So there was a lot of even though it was a team achievement, there was a lot of individual strife that I had to go through to get to that moment, to be on the field, to win the championship. So because there's an individual component to all three of the things that you mentioned. And then MLS Defender of the Year, I knew the year prior in 2004 I was with Kansas City at the time, and we played a 3-5-2 my first year with them because we had Preki, who was the reigning MLS MVP. The guy, just unbelievable. Just being around him every day. He's just so good in 1v1 situations. Can't get the ball off of him. So being around somebody of that quality was really important for a lot of different reasons. Made me a better defender. But we played in a back three, which sucked for me because I was just kind of a donkey. I just felt like a donkey. I didn't really get to use my brain. Well, unfortunately for Preki, but fortunately for me, he broke his leg in the preseason of 2004. So we switched to a back four. And I'm telling you, that 2004 team was sick, Projeet. Listen, we won the Open Cup. We got to the MLS Cup final, and we were 2 goals away. We were tied on points for the Supporters Shield, which is the team with the best record or in MLS.
Yes.
But we had 2 less goals than the other team, so they technically won it. And we
yeah.
lost MLS Cup by 1 goal. We were 3 goals or 4 goals away from being one of the first team to ever win the treble in MLS. But nobody talks about our team. And we had, and at that point, I knew that if I wanted to break into the national team, this is 2004, right, leading up to it. So there's 2 years to get to the World Cup in 2006. At this point, I'd never been called into the national team. So we're talking, 2 years from a World Cup, never been called in, and I end up starting the World Cup 2 years later. Like, life's crazy, dude. But 2004, I knew that if I wanted to get a sniff, we had to have the best defense in the league. So that was my goal. We're going to play a back four now. I'm going to be one of the center backs. I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to step up. I'm ready for the responsibility of what that means. I'm ready to take accountability for my mistakes and to hold other people accountable as a leader. And that was a really pivotal moment for me in 2004. We had the best defense in the league. They ended up giving the goal. I was up for Defender of the Year, but they gave it to Robin Fraser, who had a very good year. Don't get me wrong, but I was the best defender on the best team in the league. I don't know, dude. I don't know. You tell me. But they didn't want to give it to me right away. I've learned that just in award stuff in general, whether you're watching the Academy Awards or Emmys or whatever, like they don't usually give it to the new person right away. Like, they want to see if you can do it one more time, and then they'll give it to you. So in 2005, that's when I won it. When I had missed a good portion of the season because I had so much national team stuff, and we didn't even make the playoffs. It was so weird, dude. But whatever. So I won it in 2006. I was probably slated to win it again, having gone to the World Cup, and I broke my jaw, so I was out for the back half of that, and I was still up for Defender of the Year. So my 3-year run there, I probably could have won it a couple times, but I only won it in 05. But it really, ultimately, it validated. I'm not bitter at all, but I validated kind of all the hard work and sacrifice and becoming the player that I knew I was capable of being at that point. Like, I was ready to be this guy. And I wasn't ready to be that guy back in my rookie year, my second year, my third. I wasn't ready. But it had evolved into that okay, I know that I can be better than how I'm playing. I know I can be someone of consequence, and I figured that out and made it happen. And then obviously the cherry on top is when you make the World Cup roster. That was probably my biggest moment in my career, was when the roster got named. It obviously, getting to play in the World Cup is unbelievable. And from a playing perspective, being able to hold my own against the best players in the world with millions of people watching, the highest pressure situations, something I'll take a great deal of satisfaction from. But there was something about the relief, I think you mentioned that before, of getting named to the team, doing something that nobody thought I was capable of doing, that was so incredibly rewarding for me and everybody that believed in me along the way. That seems like its most powerful moment for me, and that ultimately propelled me into having some good moments with the national team after that in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that 2004 squad, like you said, when I was reading about, doing the research for this interview,
so good,
super underrated. Like, and Preki, like up top, like, oh my God, like MLS legend that I feel like doesn't get discussed maybe as much as he should be, because, read some great stuff about him.
We had a squad. We were good. We had Josh Wolf, we had Davey Arno, we had Kerry Zavagnin, we had Chris Klein, we had all ththese guys that were national teamers, Nick Garcia, and Diego Gutierrez, and even when Preki was out, we in some ways kind of a little more efficient without him. We didn't have the same creativity. We weren't scoring as many goals, but we were very efficient and won a lot of games 1-0. But that team was very good and very close to making history, which is kind of sad to say. But we were stacked. Absolutely.
And just like speaking about your legacy before we transition into like, USMNT talk, because you brought up the World Cup and stuff like about that. I was reading earlier, just like, I think it was like an MLS article, like top 5 or 10 center backs in MLS history. I think they put like you at number like 7 at number 7. There's like
unacceptable.
Parkhurst, like it's like, I think, okay, so their top 5 is what? Chad Marshall, number 1, Eddie Pope 2, Omar Gonzalez 3, Bocanegra 4, and then Fraser 5. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this list? Do you have like your own top 5 in MLS history? Have you like thought about this type of stuff before? And like, where do you put yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't join in too much, but for fun, we can get into it. Chad Marshall, for me, I think he's won more Defender of the Year awards than anybody else. And I would compete against him. That guy was a beast. I got to play with him in a World Cup qualifier in Guatemala. We had already qualified in 2005. We just beat Mexico to qualify for the '06 World Cup. So me and Chad got to start against Guatemala in Guatemala City. Incredible experience. Right. But that guy, yeah, I mean, that's super talented and an absolute physical specimen. And I wonder what he would say to this now, but I feel like he lacked a little bit of what I had more of, which was that like a little bit more of a stronger mentality.
Sure. I get that.
He should have played in the World Cup for us. Honestly, if Chad Marshall had that side, what I had in spades, and he had everything else, I wonder, I don't know if we'd be sharing the same story about what I'd have accomplished in my life, but he was
interesting.
The fact that he didn't play in a World Cup for us is given how talented he is and that he's being considered the number one MLS center back of all time is a bit of a tragedy given how talented he was. So I think that, he should definitely be in the top 5. I'm a huge Robin Fraser fan. I've been watching him since when I was in college and really looked up to him, and he's a friend now. And so he'd be in my top 5. Eddie Pope was somebody I always marveled at and loved playing with. What's interesting about Eddie Pope, just as a quick aside, because I am a talker, as you can probably tell. This is a podcast. Yeah, that's what we want. You want me to talk long?
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. Yeah, come on.
It's long form. It's long form. So I used to watch Eddie Pope. I used to study his game.
Right.
Because okay, this guy plays for the national team. He's better than me, but is there things that I can do that can mimic what he can do? And so I watch his positioning off the ball. I try to watch as many games in person of him that I could. And I remember going to the MLS Cup final in the Rose Bowl. I think it was in '98, and really studying his game and watching him in that particular final, which DC won. And so when I got to play with Eddie Pope on the national team, I knew that guy inside and out. I knew all his decision making, no matter where the ball was placed. And so I had a really good partnership and understanding playing next to him. And I think he felt it because I just knew exactly where he was going to be and where I could fit in to help make the game easier for him and for everybody else and the whole team overall. So I loved Eddie Pope. He'd be in my top 5. Boca Negra, I played with in college at UCLA. So we have a long history and we've been friends for a long time. Obviously captain for the U.S. at the center back position. And he played left back for us when I was in the World Cup.
Right.
And in terms of talent, he's another guy too that you have to throw in there. And then who was the other one that was
the last? Omar Gonzalez.
So that'd be the only one that I think
that was the same for me, to be honest. Yeah.
I again, Omar is incredibly talented and has been a friend for many years.
Right.
But he'd probably give me shit for saying this, but I feel like maybe I could crack in there. We both have one World Cup under our belt. A lot of talent. Yeah. And so, I think there's room for a hard worker in there. Not to say that Omar wasn't, but like a little engine that could, like myself, that had my backstory. I'm a huge Parkhurst fan.
Parkhurst for me, so I'm an Atlanta United fan, so I'm biased, but he was number 6, actually.
No, I honestly don't have any problem with Parkhurst being above me or Omar ultimately, but I love Parky's game, and
me too.
I said this. I was in the camp with him, and me and Parky were going to dinner one night, and I told him this was like when he was just getting into the national team, and I said, I think that, and I'll tell him this again to his, we still talk, and what I really love about his game is that he kind of looks like all of us. Like he looks like a normal human being. When you look at Omar's, who's a giant, Chad Marshall, who's a giant,
they're huge, yeah.
Oguchi Onyewu, who's a giant. Like these guys are physical specimens, and not a lot of us are going to look like those guys. But Parkhurst looks like a guy that could be managing an Office Depot, like he just. And I say that comes from my heart. He knows, but it didn't matter. He was so smart in his positioning, and I actually liken him to Claudio Suarez, El Emperador, who played for Mexico for 150 caps or whatever. El Emperador, that guy is also sick, not a good athlete, not very fast, but his brain was moving 3,000 times faster than everybody else, and his positioning was sick. And I think that Parky is in that same kind of category where he was using his brain more than he needed. That guy never got yellow cards. He rarely left his feet to make tackles. Like he just was always in the right spot. So, and Maldini said it before, if I had to leave my feet to make a tackle, then I've done something wrong already. And
yeah, that's right.
And he's right. So when you look at the Claudio Suarez's, you look at the Michael Parkers, you look at the Maldinis, like they're just so good at understanding where they should be situationally, right? And their situational awareness and spatial awareness off the charts. Like their IQs for the game are off the charts. And so So Parky falls into that category for me. And I thought, so get back to my story with him in the car, kids should be coming to the game to watch him play because they're going to look more like him. 95% of the players are going to look more like Parkhurst, and they're going to look like Gooch or even Jay Demerit's a freak athlete, or all these guys, right? And so I always thought that they should be studying your game because you're doing it right and making the most of your physical traits in a way that's having tremendous success. And so Parky and I talk about that a lot, about how we still feel like there's a gap or void in this country about learning spatial and situational awareness.
Right. No, that's definitely a very interesting one. And, obviously this may be like Atlanta bias coming out of me again, but, we've talked about like your top 5, like,
well,
historical.
Laurentowicz is another one. Jeff Laurentowicz is another guy, right?
Yeah. Love that guy. Very underrated.
Yeah. Super smart. Not going to blow you away. Not going to like win any 100
doesn't necessarily look like a soccer player, right? Like,
right. He could be he could be the co-manager of Office Depot with Michael Parkhurst.
I love that. Yeah. Maybe they should do that post career. Anyway, but we talked about like, So we talked about like your favorite, like, 5 MLS like center backs. Talk about that list. I'm wondering if there's anyone in the league today that's catching your eye that you think is like up next. And, obviously for me personally, I watched a lot of Parkhurst interviews. I watched Miles Robinson a lot. He played versus El Salvador last night. I think I think Parkhurst came out and said that in his opinion, Robinson was like the best 1v1 defender in MLS like a couple years ago. I watch his game and I love how he plays. So he's someone who's caught my eye. Any other center backs that you like see yourself in or have caught your eye over the years? Who's
I would say that Walker Zimmerman is someone who probably fits my mold a little bit. Sure. You can tell, good leader.
Yeah, definitely.
Good leader, steady, somebody you can count on to make play. Like when you put him into your lineup, you're not really worried about him having a bad performance. Not to say it's not going to happen from time to time. That goes for everybody, including these guys that we've already mentioned as top 5. But Zimmerman, he's already on his way to winning multiple. He's already won multiple Defender of the Years and best 11s and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, I think that he would be one. Miles Robinson is awesome. And obviously scared about his Achilles thing because sometimes players don't come back from that in a good way. But as it pertains to real time, if we're talking in the moment, I thought he looked pretty good against El Salvador last night. And I thought he grew into the game where he maybe was, and I used to do this too, where I defer to the guy that has more experience. So I defer to the Tim Reams of the world or the Eddie Popes. And then at some point, you just got to make plays. And I thought he made a lot of good plays last night. And I thought maybe his passing of the ball could still be a little bit better. It's kind of where I was back in the day. But defensively, that dude is locked down. And I thought, and this is kind of me geeking out because I really love a team that knows how to hold a good line. Not too deep, not too high. And I thought that him and Tim Ream held a really good line last night. So that understanding for him in particular and working with Tim in that way to be organized and patient is really exceptional. So I agree with Parky that his upside, especially in 1v1 situations, is incredible. Now it's just adding those other pieces to and he already has them, but it's just like, can you fine tune those things? Like sometimes a strength. Okay, cool. You want to continue to make that a strength, 1v1 defending. But those other areas, what I liked from him in particular, and this goes for any defender out there, when you win the ball, what do you do with it? Can you, because the opposing team is at its most vulnerable in transition. So when they think they have the ball and they think they're going to start committing numbers to go forward, and you can win that ball and then play forward and break the lines, that's when you can gain a lot of numerical advantages and maybe sting them going the other way. So the more he can do, he did it a couple times as El Salvador got tired last night, and I thought it made a big difference. It just helps the team kind of stay on the front foot. And I thought he did an excellent job with that. And so, the future is incredibly bright for Miles Robinson. So I hope that he stays as healthy as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely agree with you and love your analysis there. So we've talked, a little bit about MLS, about defenders, about your experience there. You mentioned earlier getting that 2006 call up, what it meant to you. Was it like after that 2005 Defender of the Year that it became apparent that you would be like, a part of this national team? Like when was that, like when did that sort of come into your mind, I guess?
It didn't really come into my mind until it happened, to be honest.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was on the bubble. I was competing with Greg Berhalter.
Right.
To make the team. And Greg Berhalter had played in the 2002 World Cup and had done well in his time. Yeah. Now, in this particular cycle, he hadn't been as sharp, and I had made the most of my opportunities. There were a couple games that were a little sketchy. I had bilateral sports hernia surgery. So let me go from the beginning of 2006. So we have a big January camp, right? So you have 3 weeks. You're in front of the coaches and you're around the group and you're basically competing with the other guys that are on the bubble to be the guys that are on top of that bubble. So I'm thinking like me, Kerry Zavagnin, Eddie Johnson, Josh Wolf. We're all kind of in the same. We're all playing for Kansas City at the time, but we're all feeling kind of bubble-esque. So what can we do to put our names at the top of that list? Now, Wolfie, we thought had an edge because he'd played in 2002, but he felt like he didn't know for sure. So in that camp, I remember on the first day, Glenn Meyernick, known as Mooch, the assistant coach for Bruce Arena, rest in peace, he said to me, hey, we need you to start thinking. I pulled me to the side and said, hey, we need you to start thinking about how you're going to defend against Czech Republic, Italy, and Ghana. And I was like, is he talking to me? Is Eddie Pope right behind me? Who's he talking to? Because I couldn't believe that he was already kind of projecting me into that space and thinking of me in that way. And so that was my first little step towards maybe this is possible. So that was my first, okay. And then we had some friendlies, you lead up to it, and we had a game against Germany in March. And actually, let me go back. We played against Japan in San Francisco, and I started that game. And Japan was going to be like our first real formidable opponent. Like Japan was going to be bringing, I think it was a open FIFA date, so they're going to be bringing their guys. And I knew that, hey, anytime we had a chance to play against teams that will be competing for the World Cup or considered good national teams, I got to play well. We went up 3-0 that game, and I played solid. I was very good, and I'll be honest. If I'm not good, I'll tell you if I'm not good. But I thought I was very good, and I just played simple. And we went up. We ended up winning 3-2. We gave up a couple crap goals at the end, which I'm still disappointed about because I take a great deal of pride in clean sheets, Projeet. But I would say that, but it was enough, right? To like, okay, I did well enough in this one to move me on to the next phase. And the next phase was playing against Germany in Germany. And I wanted to play in that game, and I didn't know if I was going to. I was competing against Corey Gibbs as well. And so it was me, Corey Gibbs, and Greg Berhalter in the back. Eddie Pope was a late scratch the week before because of a bad back or whatever. So it was me. We played a back three. And it was kind of a morph of a back four because we had Steve Cherundolo kind of on the right side. But ultimately, it was me, Corey, and Berhalter. And I was dealing with some hernia issues, significant hernia issues, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't like. What do you do, Projeet? Do you not play? And then give up that opportunity to hold your own against some of the best in the world. And if you do that, you're probably going to be on the World Cup team. Or do you scratch yourself and give that opportunity to somebody else and maybe they move past that? That's where I was. And when you know that the World Cup roster is looming and it's going to be announced 2 months later, I'm going to take the risk. And so I wasn't 100% in that game. And I actually watched that game back. Somebody sent me the link and I watched that game back. And for honestly 80% of that game, I was pretty good. And we're talking, this is Germany's A team. Miroslav Klose, Michael Ballack, Per Mertesacker. Like you got Podolski came on as a sub. Like you had all these guys that were good. Oliver Kahn in goal. I mean, they were good. Very, very good. And it was 0-0 at half, and they got booed off the field. Now, we had trouble manufacturing a lot of consistent attacks, but we weren't necessarily getting outclassed by any stretch of the imagination. And right after halftime, and this is what I cringed when I watched this. The kickoff comes back to me, and I try to play a short one out wide to Cherundolo, but he's under immediate pressure. I should have just lumped it in the corner. Okay, so Steve's already pissed at me. And I shouldn't have given him the ball, but I was like just trying to keep it for who knows. Like, why are you going to keep it there? Just put it in the corner, and then we can turn them around and we can press them there.
Right.
And so he's pissed. So they do a quick throw in, and it gets behind, and Steve's still on tilt, and so he fouls the guy, and off that free kick they score.
Oh no!
So I cringed because I was the catalyst for that. I can be mad at Steve for whatever, but it started with me making a poor decision ultimately tactically. It was a fine pass. It just was under some pressure, and I didn't give. You got to give information with your passes, and I kind of just gave Steve here you go. It wasn't like here's the pass, and I'm giving it to you with a little bit of weight, so you know that you have a one touch to somebody inside, or I'm going to play it to you kind of hard. You can take a touch and play it back to me. I'll give you support, and I can hit it up the line. I didn't give him any of that. I just like, here you go, hot potato, take it. Good luck with that, and that's what I was pissed about, and ultimately led to that. And then we gave up a shitty free kick, and they scored, make it 1-0. And once they got their first goal, they relaxed, and then we were in trouble. We ended up losing 4-1, and None of the goals were ultimately my mistake, but I was like indirectly involved, kind of like the first one, where I could have maybe done something a little bit better. I could have maybe gotten a little bit tighter on somebody to make the game a little bit harder. And so now you're juggling all these things, right? And I'm also worried that I'm not 100%, and I'm not trying to like put myself in a foot race with anybody, but I got Miroslav close to trying to, that guy's amazing, by the way. And I'm trying to track Michael Ballack in the box on a back post. This is insane. You're like, what am I even doing? And you can't even hear anything. And you're competing against Berhalter and Gibbs, for who's going to make the team. And there's just so much emotional weight going on that people don't take into consideration sometimes when you're going through this process as a player. And then after the game, everybody's pissed. I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I get picked for drug testing. So I have to go sit, and Oliver Kahn gets picked for his team.
Oh, wow.
So it's me and Oliver Kahn in like a closet, just sitting there. He's pissed because he gave up a bad goal. He thinks it's going to cost him a starting spot for the World Cup, which it did. They went with Jens Lehmann instead, who was playing for Arsenal. And he was pissed and grunting, because I just think he grunts anyway. I don't even know if he speaks English. But so we didn't say much to each other. We're both pissed. And then it takes you an hour to piss. Like, you're so dehydrated, it takes you forever. So you just sit there. Yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. And then the team's got to wait for you. So now the team's already pissed because we lost. And now they've been waiting for you for an hour and a half, and then you got to get in the bus. It was such a mess. And so I get into the elevator, and now I'm like, the vibes in the bus were so bad that you can't make eye contact with anybody. And so I get into the elevator after the game with Casey Keller. Now, Casey played in Germany. He was embarrassed, right? For giving up 4 goals and a half. And everybody wanted to show, well, this is our big last opportunity. And I get in the elevator with him. And sometimes when you're a teammate, you're looking for someone to commiserate with, or you're looking for someone to put their arm around you and say, hey, man, it's okay. We got just onwards and upwards from here, which is kind of my leadership style per se. Right. And basically I went searching for that from Casey. Casey does not pull any punches, doesn't care about your feelings, and he basically is like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially left me saying you sucked. Dude. So I'm like, I'm like, oh my head just goes, my head couldn't even go further down, and it somehow found a new level. I go back into my room, and for whatever reason, we had our own rooms at this particular hotel. Usually you have a roommate, and I just flopped onto my bed. If you can remember the what's his name on Arrested Development when he flops onto the bed with his backpack.
Oh, Michael Cera, right?
Yeah. So when he died, that was me, and I flopped, and I just cried. I honestly, I can laugh about it now, but I cried for like a good sob, like proper sobs for like 5 or 10 minutes, because I thought it was over. I thought that was it, and I took that risk, and it didn't pay off, and I thought I blew it. And so to add to that, I was suffering, dude. I could barely walk because of my hernia stuff. And I had put it on a good face, and I didn't know what to say. And I didn't want to use it as an excuse for why I didn't perform as well as the coaches wanted me to, or so on. Like, I had kind of built up to having good performances, and I finally had a little bit of a slip up where I didn't play as well as they expected, or how I hoped. And so I had to go face the music, and I went and told the coaching staff that I have this issue and I don't know what to do. And so I flew back to Kansas City, and the Kansas City was pissed because this is at a time where the budgets weren't, like, who's paying for what, right? So I needed to get surgery. Right. Kansas City's like, hey, well, it happened on US's dime. And I'm like, well, actually, it's some wear and tear. And they're like, well, we don't want to pay for it. And US Soccer's like, okay, fine, we'll pay for it. So I went to this woman in Munich who gets you back in 2 weeks. Most hernia surgeries is 6 to 8 weeks recovery, right?
Wow.
And I needed to be ready before that. So I went, dude, I got back in 2 weeks. And I was struggling. There's more to this story, but I'll just cut you to the end here. 2 weeks, and we play against New England Revolution, Clint Dempsey, Taylor Twellman, Pat Noonan, Steve Ralston, all these guys that are also in the bubble trying to get on the World Cup roster. And the coaching staff comes to Kansas City to watch our game, to see how I'm going to perform. And I knew they were coming, and I took a lot of painkillers to get myself in a good spot. And I ended up scoring the game-winning goal to win 1-0. And that put me back into contention to be picked on the team. And so I ended up making the roster. I ended up beating out Greg Berhalter in that game, or just in general. And me and Corey Gibbs were the center backs to go along with Gooch and Eddie Pope. Yeah, it's crazy story.
Crazy how it
crazy.
Works, man. Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely insane. And you bring up this game versus Germany. It was such a struggle. 4-1 loss. I can imagine that. I was reading in the World Cup. I think you guys you held Italy to a 1-1 draw, right?
We did. Yeah, that was. I didn't get to play against the Czech Republic to start.
Right.
I was warming up for that game, and I'll be honest with you, Projeet. I was warming up, and I was like, I don't know if this is the game I want to get into. This Czech Republic team is awesome. They were so
Yeah. It was like
to this
Milan Baros
day.
at the time, right?
Yeah, they had. I think he was hurt actually.
Oh, was he? Okay, okay.
I don't think they had Jan Koller up top, who was like 6'9", played for Borussia Dortmund. He dunked on us 3 minutes in to score, and then he went out with a hamstring injury like 20 minutes in, and they just didn't have anybody that could hold the ball up and be a threat like him. So they and Barros was out. I would have remembered him for sure. And so they didn't even make it out of the group, and they should have, because they were so good. But they had Thomas Rosicky and Pavel Nedved and and Petr Cech in goal. Like they were. I honestly, to this day, and I've watched a lot of national team games since, I have never seen a national team play as well against us as they did. They were so prepared. They scored early. Crazy. They scored some sick goals. We had no answers for them. And that was a tough one. Talk about being in a tough locker room afterwards. But because there's a lot of hype around our team going into that. But we were in the group of death, and we just played the wrong team first. But we redeemed ourselves against Italy, and we're just a little unlucky against Ghana. And that's how it goes at that level.
Absolutely. I understand. And hey, I mean, I have a couple of Saudi Arabian friends on campus who talk a lot about, like they have a little claim to the World Cup because they beat Argentina. Yeah, I mean, we drew Italy, so maybe a little claim to the 2006 World Cup. Like,
totally.
We're as good as them, right?
Should, that's what I'm hanging my hat on. I happened to play for the U.S. that didn't get out of the group. Yeah, sweet.
Oh my god.
2002 we get to the quarterfinals. 2010 we win our group.
16,
2014 we get out of the group of death. But 2006, we got grouped, and it was a little unfortunate. We would have played Brazil in the round of 16, which would have been really special. But that's the way it goes.
That's how it goes. Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously we are running out of time, so I do want to get to the back four quiz. Before we do, I did just want to ask one question about KickTV, about the old soccer media days, because my friends would definitely kill me if I didn't, and I definitely want to hear. So many funny skits with that media company. I feel like you brought the attention of soccer to so many people that didn't really have an in-depth vision of the game. Yeah. My favorite KickTV moment ever was, if you remember that skit you did with Jose Mourinho's Real Madrid, where you resigned for one day. Oh yeah. Even on your Wikipedia page, it said Real Madrid current player, 1 day contract. So I thought that was hysterical. And I'm a Real Madrid fan as well. So that one really, love Jose Mourinho and everything. Very much resonated with me. Do you have a favorite skit comedy thing that you did with KickTV over the years?
Yeah, I think the one that you pick up. But what's funny about that is, and I'll get in depth here because I think it's very cool. It was a really special day for us. When I think about KickTV, we weren't a traditional news outlet, so we never got access anywhere. We had to beg or sneak in or whatever to get to these opportunities. So we just fortuitously, 2 days before or a day before Madrid were coming in to do this appearance at the Adidas store in Soho down in New York City, we had one of the hosts of Bleacher Report on our show just to talk about the Champions League or whatever, or this upcoming European season and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, by the way, I guess I'll see you at the Real Madrid event. And we're like, what the hell are you talking about? We had no idea, dude. So we had to then beg. We had to beg. We had to go through Adidas to get our way into this event. So they thankfully had printed up a jersey with my name on it and got the 1 day contract, and they had it all set up. And so shout out to them for making that happen. But we didn't even know. So that's just to give you an idea of how we were being treated by traditional media and brands and outlets. We were just so renegade, guerrilla marketing on the ground, trying to make the stuff happen. Thankfully, a lot of stuff happened in New York City, right? There's a lot of action happening in and around. So we go to this event, and I get to interview Jose Mourinho. And I'm last. They let me stay for last. And I signed the 1 day contract with Real Madrid, which is awesome. And so somebody tells him that Jimmy used to play. And he's like, win. And I said, oh, well, I played for the U.S. and in the World Cup and whatever. And he goes, let me see the back of your jersey. So he's like, oh, I know who you are. And I said, I don't believe you, but I really appreciate you saying that, And but he probably did in some capacity. He's obviously well known for his attention to detail and how much scouting he does. I just don't know where I would fall into why he needed to scout me, but I appreciated him saying that. And what happened was, when I watched him do the other interviews, he was a bit cagey, as we know Mourinho to be. But when it came to talking with me, he was like my buddy. And they were so thrilled because I played, right? That respect that he had for me was different. So he was willing to answer any of my questions. I asked him in this interview, can I be on your coaching staff?
Yeah.
And he said, I've got 10 of my friends already. I don't have room for you. And then I asked him, when are you going to be the coach of the national team for the US? And he said, my time in the club scene isn't done yet, but I won't rule it out. So maybe 20 years. And what's funny is now he's being seriously considered as the national team coach. And that was in what, 2012? So
12, I think. 11 or 12, yeah.
Like 10 or 11 years. So he's a little ahead of schedule if that happens. But so I was a little bit ahead of it. Then we interviewed Iker Casillas, and he also said that he knew who I was. And I'm like, you guys got to stop the bullshitting. But it was really cool to have that opportunity. And then we went to go see them play against Liverpool at Yankee Stadium. And I got to run around the bases at Yankee Stadium. It was super funny. And then I got to Block Party is one of my favorite bands of all time. And I got to see them play that night. So you're now bringing back a memory of one of my favorite days ever with KickTV and being in New York City. And so it was great. Now, with regard to my favorite skit, my outrage stuff was probably the thing that I love the most, where I was screaming at the camera and
I love that.
And I had the idea. And another one too that I had that was my idea was Good Weekend, Bad Weekend, which really resonated with a lot of people in a way that I was totally unexpected. Because we would do like weekly recaps, or Monday morning we got to recap what we saw over the weekend, and we just needed to have some type of vehicle to make it a little bit more punchy. Otherwise, you're just kind of talking and droning on, and you just want to like, even if Barcelona and you don't really, people don't know the details, like, you know what, they lost 3-0, they suck, and then you just move on to the next one, and so it just allowed us to have. We started to see content in a different way. And in some ways we were building towards this cutout content where you do it's a longer form. And I'm sure you'll do it with this podcast, as you should. You cut out like a take I say or something you say, and then you post it for 15 seconds somewhere. So it gets more visibility, and then you can turn them to this big one. We were ahead of that, and we were building stuff and building content that was kind of working towards these little snippets of fun information. But outrage was ridiculous. And it's hard to replicate here by myself because you need a full crew kind of moving a camera around. But I saw Jim Cramer, who does Mad Money. And I was like, okay, I like a little bit of that, guys. Like insane.
I see that. Yeah.
And I started to take a little bit of different elements that I saw from elsewhere, and I just kind of mashed them all together and just put soccer as the main topic. And people loved Outraged. And even though people just talk to me about KickTV overall, but when it was happening, they wanted me to do more of it. And it takes, I was exhausted for a good hour after I would be on camera screaming. So I don't even know how the Jim Cramers of the world do all that stuff. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I liked those ones. And it was always rewarding when an idea that you had resonates with the audience. It's an incredibly satisfying feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just such a throwback to because I remember back in middle school, that was when it's there's no worries in life, right? You just go home, watch some soccer videos, go to sleep, play FIFA with your friends, right? So
yeah, I probably should apologize to your parents right now for all the cussing, but we tried to bleep out everything that we could.
Oh my God, no, we had Justin Miramom and he dropped a lot, so they're used to it by now.
Gotcha, cool.
Oh my God, but anyway, Jimmy, we've talked about your career, we talked about soccer media, the college days, and I think we got a pretty good coverage of who you are and what you've done in your life, which very excited for. But for now, as I let you know, the way we end every episode is with the back four quiz. So
there we go.
We have 4 questions. It's about your life and career. We do this end of every episode. We'll see how many you can get, and we'll go from there if you're ready.
I'm ready. Can I say a preface that I retired due to concussion? So if I don't know some of the answers, I've got a great reason.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. 100% understood.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, we'll start off with your youth days. What was the name of the first soccer team you ever joined when you were 5 in the AYSL?
The Kickaroos.
Yes, sir. The Kickaroos. Right. Easy answer.
Easy answer. I have my trophy still. It says best dribbler on the back.
I was just about to say he won best dribbler there.
I've never had a coach ever say that since. So I'll take that to the bank.
Yeah, I bet. You were the Messi of the Kickaroos. Okay.
I'm so good. Three goals a game, baby. Let's go.
I love it. Okay. Second question. This one is a little bit interesting. So today, March 28th, it is a famous U.S. men's national team player's birthday. He's also held a role within the U.S. Soccer Federation. Do you know whose birthday it is today?
I don't. I'll guess Brian McBride.
Close. It was Ernie Stewart's birthday.
I knew it was going to be one of those two guys. 50-50. I blew it.
Very close. Right?
Happy
Hey, what can you
birthday,
do?
Ernie Stewart.
I literally just saw that on Instagram before we were recording. I was like, you know what? I'll stick that in.
Yeah,
Whatever.
that's a good one. That's a good one.
Okay, and then let's go with third. We'll go back to a somewhat easy one. Do you remember who your first ever cap was for the U.S. men's national team was against?
Yeah, you don't forget that. It's Cuba. It was in Seattle for
go.
the opening game of the 2005 Gold Cup. I was so nervous. Yeah, I was really nervous.
I can imagine. Well, there we go. 2 for 3. Last question. We'll see if you can end up on a high note. This one is a little bit interesting. I think you will get it, but we'll see. What is the name of the scorer of the first penalty kick in MLS Cup final history during regulation time in MLS Cup final history?
Wow. So 96 DC versus the Galaxy. Oh my God.
I don't think it was 96. I would say maybe Wikipedia's wrong.
Maybe.
Mine says it's in the 2000 first penalty during regulation time.
Regulation. Okay.
Yes,
regulation.
Yes. So normally the score of the first penalty kick during regulation in an MLS Cup final, you know him well. I'll let you know that.
MLS Cup final, first penalty kick. No, it can't be Aleko Eskandarian.
It's not.
It's Miklas Molnar, 2000.
The answer is actually Josh Wolf.
No way.
2004 MLS Cup final versus DC United. Right? The one you played.
Yeah, we scored. Did they not? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think you guys were 3-1 down.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, I'm the one that got the penalty for us.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. So yeah.
God, 2004 is the first ever penalty in real. It took 8 years.
Wikipedia could be wrong. They've been wrong before, to be honest.
I should have known. I was thinking that game. I don't know why I thought Aleko when he actually scored 2 goals in the run of play, but he cheated on the second one. I would say super bitter. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wolfie. He was my roommate.
Absolutely. No.
I should have known that. Sorry, Wolfie.
Pretty
I
crazy one there. But hey, 2 for 4. Not bad at all. I gave you some hard ones in there too. So hey, what can you do at the end of the day? But
I'm trying. That's my whole career, Projeet. I'm just continuing to try.
I know. And the concussions too, right? The concussions.
Concussions. How am I supposed to know that?
Absolutely. Well, anyway, Jimmy, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this interview for so long. Really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you so much for making the time, man. Really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Continued success with On Soccer, and it was an honor to be on the show. Thank you for all the support over the years.